Welcome. This is Cheating Fact Real Accounts of Deception and Justice. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I'm here to share true stories of betrayal and the pursuit of truth. Because sometimes the people we trust most are the ones hiding the biggest secrets. My name is Michael, and this is the story of how my 15-year marriage ended not with arguments or growing apart, but with a hotel receipt that had another man's signature on it. 3 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Rebecca and I had built what seemed like an ideal life together. She was a marketing director at a pharmaceutical company, climbing the corporate ladder with determination I'd always admired. I ran a successful consulting firm from our home office. We had our routines, our shared goals, and what I believed was complete honesty between us. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in March. Rebecca walked through our front door at nearly 10 p.m., which was unusual but not unprecedented. She'd been working later recently, always mentioning new projects and demanding clients. But that night, something felt different. "How was your day?" I asked, looking up from my laptop as she set her briefcase down with unusual care. "Exhausting," she replied, but her voice carried an energy that contradicted her words. "The Henderson account is requiring so much extra attention." I'd heard about the Henderson account for months. According to Rebecca, it was their biggest potential client, requiring extensive research and countless meetings. She'd been working closely with the team lead, a man named Preston who she mentioned frequently in professional contexts. What struck me as odd that Tuesday wasn't what she said, but what she didn't say. Rebecca had always been someone who shared details about her day, complaining about difficult colleagues or celebrating small victories. Lately, those details had become vague references to the team and important meetings. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to patterns I'd previously dismissed. Rebecca was showering immediately when she got home, even after short days at the office. Her phone, which used to sit casually on counters and tables, was now always face down and within arm's reach. She'd developed a habit of stepping outside or into another room for certain calls, claiming they were boring work stuff. The most telling change was in her schedule. Rebecca had always been organized, keeping a shared calendar we both used for planning. Suddenly, that calendar showed generic entries like client, meeting, or project review with no specific times or locations. When I asked about details for planning our own schedules, she'd wave it off, saying everything was tentative. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't looking for problems. I loved my wife and trusted her completely. But when someone's behavior changes dramatically, it's natural to notice. The Rebecca I'd married was open, detailed, and included me in her professional victories and frustrations. This new version was guarded and distant. The breakthrough came in early April when Rebecca forgot her jacket at home. She'd rushed out for an early meeting, and I noticed the blazer hanging on our bedroom chair around lunchtime. I decided to drop it off at her office as a surprise. Maybe take her to lunch if her schedule allowed. When I arrived at the pharmaceutical building, I checked in at reception and asked them to call Rebecca's extension. The receptionist, a friendly woman named Maria whom I'd met at several company functions, looked confused. "I'm sorry, Mr. Chun, but Rebecca isn't in the office today. She's been working remotely on the Henderson project most of this week." My stomach dropped, but I managed to maintain composure. "Oh, of course. I must have misunderstood her schedule. Could you tell me where the Henderson meetings are typically held? I'll try to catch her there." Maria's confusion deepened. "The Henderson account? I'm not familiar with that client. Let me check with her department." After a brief phone call, Maria returned with information that changed everything. There was no Henderson account. There had never been a Henderson account in the 6 months she'd been mentioning it. I left Rebecca's jacket with Maria and drove home in a daze. My wife had been lying to me for months about where she was spending her days. The question wasn't whether something was wrong. It was how extensive the deception had become. That afternoon, I did something I'd never imagined I'd need to do. I began investigating my own wife. I started with our shared credit card statements, which I'd always left for Rebecca to organize since she was better with financial details. Going through 3 months of charges, I found a pattern I'd missed. Every Tuesday and Thursday, there were charges at a coffee shop across town, always between 10 a.m. and noon. On days when Rebecca claimed to be in back-to-back meetings, she was apparently having leisurely coffee breaks in a part of the city She had no professional reason to visit. More concerning were the hotel charges. Not for rooms, but for the hotel restaurant and bar. The Grandview Hotel, an upscale business hotel, showed up on our statement 6 times in the past 2 months. Always lunch charges. Always on days Rebecca claimed to be working late at the office. I'd found the pattern, but I needed to understand who she was meeting. The following Tuesday, I did something that felt like a violation of everything I believed about marriage, but seemed necessary given the circumstances. I followed my wife. Rebecca left our house at her usual time, 8:30 a.m. Instead of driving toward her office, she headed across town. I stayed several cars behind, feeling like a character in a movie I never wanted to be part of. She pulled into the parking lot of that same coffee shop I'd seen on our credit card statements. Through the shop's large windows, I watched Rebecca take a corner table. At exactly 10 a.m., a man in a business suit joined her. Even from a distance, I could see this wasn't a professional meeting. Their body language spoke of familiarity and intimacy, leaning across the table, touching hands, sharing private jokes. I didn't recognize the man, but I took photos with my phone. Later, using social media and some basic detective work, I identified him as Preston Walsh, a senior marketing executive at a competing pharmaceutical company. This wasn't Rebecca's coworker or team lead. He was someone she would have met through industry events and conferences. The next piece of evidence came accidentally. Rebecca had been handling our dry cleaning pickup, but that Thursday she asked me to collect it instead, claiming she'd be stuck in meetings all day. When I arrived at the cleaners, the owner, Mrs. Kim, made a casual comment that revealed more than she intended. "Tell Rebecca I found that hotel receipt in her jacket pocket," she said, holding up a small piece of paper. I always check pockets before cleaning, and I didn't want her to lose anything important. I thanked Mrs. Kim and looked at the receipt. It was from the Grandview Hotel restaurant, dated the previous Tuesday, the same day I'd watched Rebecca meet Preston at the coffee shop. But what made my heart stop was a detail I hadn't expected. The receipt showed 2 meals, and it was signed by Preston Walsh, not Rebecca. He had paid for their lunch. This wasn't just a meeting between industry colleagues. Preston was taking my wife out for romantic meals and signing the bills, like they were a couple. That evening, I confronted Rebecca with what I knew, but I was strategic about it. I didn't reveal everything I'd discovered. I wanted to see how much she would lie when given the opportunity to tell the truth. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She looked up from her laptop, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before: fear. "Maria at your office mentioned you've been working remotely this week, but you've been leaving the house every morning. Where are you actually going?" For several seconds, Rebecca said nothing. I could almost see her calculating how much I might know and how much she could safely lie about. Finally, she said, "I've been working on a special project that requires confidentiality. I can't discuss the details, but it's perfectly legitimate." Even facing direct questioning, she was doubling down on deception. That's when I knew the marriage was over, regardless of what else I might discover. "Rebecca, there is no Henderson account at your company. I've seen our credit card statements showing hotel, meals, and coffee shops across town on days you claim to be at the office. I know about Preston Walsh." The color drained from her face. For a moment, I thought she might continue lying, but something in my expression told her I knew too much. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "I know enough. The question is what happens next." What happened next was a conversation that lasted until nearly 3 a.m. Rebecca told me about meeting Preston at an industry conference 8 months earlier, about how their professional relationship had gradually become personal, and how she'd convinced herself that their connection was something special worth protecting. She admitted to the secret meetings, the elaborate scheduling deceptions, and the emotional affair that had become physical 3 months earlier. She claimed she'd been trying to figure out how to handle the situation without hurting anyone, but her solution had been to continue lying to everyone involved. The most difficult part of that conversation wasn't learning about the affair, it was realizing that the woman I'd been married to for 15 years had become someone capable of sustained, elaborate deception. The Rebecca I thought I knew would never have been able to lie so consistently and convincingly. But here's where the story takes a turn that Rebecca hadn't anticipated. During my investigation, I discovered that Preston Walsh was also married, with 2 teenage children. More importantly, his company and Rebecca's pharmaceutical firm were currently bidding against each other for a major government contract. Their secret relationship wasn't just adultery, it was a potential conflict of interest that could have serious professional consequences. I gave Rebecca 24 hours to decide how she wanted to handle the situation. She could come clean to Preston's wife and both of their employers, or I would provide them with the evidence I'd gathered. Rebecca chose to protect herself and Preston rather than take responsibility for their actions. She begged me to keep quiet, promising to end the affair and work on our marriage. But trust, once broken this completely, can't be repaired with promises. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Preston's wife, Helen, whose contact information I'd found through social media. I introduced myself, explained the situation with compassion, and offered to share the evidence I'd gathered if she wanted it. Helen thanked me for my honesty and asked me to send everything I had. The second call was to the ethics hotline at Rebecca's pharmaceutical company. I provided them with documentation, showing that their marketing director had been having secret meetings with a senior executive at a competing firm during a period of competitive bidding. I made it clear that I had no knowledge of whether confidential information had been shared, but thought the company should be aware of the relationship. The third call was to Preston's company, where I reported the same information to their compliance department. Within a week, both Rebecca and Preston were facing internal investigations at their respective companies. Rebecca was suspended pending the outcome of the inquiry, and Preston was immediately removed from any involvement with the government contract bidding process. The personal consequences followed quickly. Helen filed for divorce, taking screenshots of Rebecca's social media posts and the evidence I'd provided as documentation of the affair's timeline. Rebecca found herself facing not just the end of our marriage, but potential career destruction and a very public scandal within their industry. 3 months later, Rebecca's company concluded their investigation and terminated her employment for conduct inconsistent with company values and ethical standards. Preston received a formal censure and was demoted, though he kept his job. I want to be clear about something. I didn't take these actions out of spite or revenge. I took them because lies have consequences, and people who are being deceived deserve to know the truth. Helen had the right to know about her husband's affair. Both companies had the right to know about the potential conflict of interest. Rebecca had months to make different choices. She could have been honest about her feelings, asked for marriage counseling, or ended our relationship with integrity. Instead, she chose deception, and those choices led to consequences she hadn't considered. Today, I'm rebuilding my life with hard-earned wisdom about trust and honesty. Rebecca is working in a different industry, and I heard through mutual friends that her relationship with Preston ended shortly after their professional lives imploded. Sometimes people think they can have everything they want without paying the price for their choices. Rebecca thought she could have our marriage, her career success, and her secret relationship with Preston. She believed she was smart enough to manage the deception indefinitely. But the truth has a way of surfacing, especially when people become careless with their lies. A hotel receipt with another man's signature might seem like a small detail, but it was the piece of evidence that brought everything into focus. If there's a lesson in this story, it's that integrity matters more than temporary happiness. Rebecca chose excitement over honesty, and the price she paid was everything she'd built over 15 years. The hardest part of this experience wasn't losing my marriage, it was learning that the person I'd trusted most was capable of such elaborate deception. But in facing that difficult truth, I discovered something important about myself. I have the strength to demand honesty in my relationships and the courage to walk away when that standard isn't met. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've experienced betrayal in your own relationships, remember that you deserve honesty and respect. Sometimes the people we love make choices that force us to make difficult decisions. But choosing truth over comfort is always the right path forward. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of betrayal and justice. Until next time, remember that the truth always surfaces eventually.